No one could know, but my heart already belonged to someone. CTA. Have you ever kept a love so secret that revealing it could destroy everything you've built? Listen to this heartbreaking confession of a man who lived a double life for 20 years. The weight of secrets is heaviest when they're carried alone. My name is James Mitchell, and for over 20 years I lived a life divided, half in the light, where everyone could see, and half in shadow, where my heart truly dwelled. This is the story of how I betrayed everyone I loved, because I couldn't betray myself. Lakeside, Michigan isn't known for much beyond its cherry orchards and the summer tourism that keeps our economy afloat. It's the kind of small town where everyone knows your business before you do, where tradition isn't just respected, it's enforced through whispers and stares. I was born here 52 years ago to parents who worked the same cherry farm there. Parents had before them. The Mitchell family name meant something in Lakeside: hard work, integrity, community service. My father served on the town council for 30 years. My mother ran the historical society until her passing. Growing up as the youngest of 3 boys, I learned early what was expected of me: excel in school, play football like my brothers, attend the local church, eventually take over the family business, marry a local girl, and raise the next generation of Mitchells to continue our legacy. And I did all of it, almost all of it, because disappointing my family seemed worse than disappointing myself. I met Sarah Johnson in our senior year of high school. She was beautiful, kind, intelligent, everything a young man was supposed to want. We were crowned king and queen at prom, voted most likely to marry in the yearbook. Everyone expected us to be together, and so we were. I proposed the summer after college graduation, partly because I loved her companionship, and partly because it was time, according to the invisible schedule that governed life in Lakeside. "I'll make you happy, Sarah," I promised the night I gave her my grandmother's ring. "We'll build a good life together." She cried happy tears. Her parents celebrated. My parents nodded with approval. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Except for one detail no one knew. I had already met Thomas. Thomas Reynolds came to Lakeside the summer before my senior year of college. He was from Chicago, escaping city life to spend 3 months helping his aging uncle run the marina on the lake. I was home for the summer, working the cherry harvest as always, when my boat motor died halfway across the lake. Thomas was the one who spotted me drifting, took out a rescue boat, and towed me back to shore. "You're lucky I saw you," he said, securing my boat to the dock. "Not many people out on Tuesdays." The sun caught in his dark hair as he worked, his hands confident with the ropes. Something about the way he moved, with purpose, with certainty, made it impossible for me to look away. "I owe you one," I replied, extending my hand. "James Mitchell." He took it, his grip firm and warm. "Thomas Reynolds. And maybe you can repay me by showing me what people actually do for fun around here. My uncle thinks fun is watching fishing shows and being in bed by 9. We laughed, and something shifted in the air between us, something I had never felt before, but instantly recognized, like a language I'd always known but never spoken. That evening I took Thomas to the quarry, where locals swam on hot summer nights. We talked until the stars emerged, about books and music and dreams that seemed bigger than Lakeside could contain. "Why do you stay here?" he asked, floating on, his back in the cool water, his voice echoing slightly against the stone walls. "Someone like you could do anything, go anywhere." No one had ever asked me that question before. In Lakeside, staying wasn't a choice. It was simply what happened, unless something went terribly wrong. "It's home," I said finally, the words feeling both true and insufficient. "My family's been here for generations. The cherry farm will be mine someday." Thomas turned his head toward me, water droplets catching the moonlight on his face. "Is that what you want, though? To inherit your life instead of choosing it? I didn't answer, couldn't answer. Instead, I dove deep into the dark water, staying under until my lungs burned, emerging only when I absolutely had to breathe. Thomas was watching me when I surfaced, his eyes thoughtful. "You don't have to answer that," he said quietly. "But maybe you should ask yourself. That summer changed everything, though no one knew it but me. Thomas and I became inseparable, claiming to be just friends while spending every possible moment together. We fished at dawn, hiked the trails around the lake, stayed up talking in his uncle's boat after the marina closed. And one night, as a thunderstorm raged outside the boathouse where we'd taken shelter, Thomas kissed me. I kissed him back without hesitation, without thought, with nothing but the sudden, overwhelming feeling that I was finally waking up after years of sleepwalking through my own life. "I've wanted to do that since the day we met," he whispered, his forehead pressed against mine, rain hammering on the roof above us. "I've wanted you to," I admitted, my voice shaking. "But we can't." "I know," he said, understanding immediately what I couldn't fully articulate. "I'm leaving at the end of summer anyway, back to Chicago, back to real life. This feels more real than anything," I told him, and it was the most honest I'd ever been. For 8 precious weeks, Thomas and I created our own world within the confines of Lakeside, finding hidden moments and secret places where we could be ourselves. I knew it was temporary, knew it had to end. And perhaps that's why I allowed myself to fall so completely. When August came and Thomas packed his belongings into his car, I stood in the marina parking lot, maintaining a careful distance, offering a casual goodbye that betrayed nothing of what we had shared. "You could visit Chicago sometime," he suggested, his eyes saying what his words couldn't. "It's not that far." "Maybe," I replied, though we both knew I wouldn't. Lakeside had expectations, and I lacked the courage to defy them. "Take care of yourself, Thomas." He drove away, and I returned to Sarah, to my parents, to the life that had been mapped out for me before I was born. I threw myself into wedding, in plans, into learning the business side of the cherry farm, into being exactly who everyone expected James Mitchell to be. If I sometimes woke in the night with the phantom sensation of Thomas's hand in mine, well, that was my burden to bear alone. Sarah and I married the following June, a lavish affair at the Lakeside Chapel where generations of Mitchells had exchanged vows. She was radiant, deserving of far more than the fractured heart I offered her. I promised to love and cherish her for all my days, and I meant it. In every way, I was capable of love. "We're going to be so happy," she whispered as we danced our first dance as husband and wife. "I'll make sure of it," I promised, and in that moment I truly believed I could. For the first year of our marriage, I convinced myself I was content. Sarah and I moved into a small house on the edge of the cherry farm, close enough to my parents for convenience, but far enough for privacy. We established routines, joined the same social clubs our parents belonged to, attended church on Sundays. Sarah took a position teaching elementary school. I worked alongside my father, learning every aspect of the business that would someday be mine. And then, on a business trip to Chicago to meet with distributors, I ran into Thomas. I was crossing Michigan Avenue, my mind on the meeting I just left, when someone called my name. I turned, and there he was, looking exactly the same and somehow entirely different, more confident, more himself than he'd been in Lakeside. "James Mitchell," he said, smiling broadly. "I can't believe it's you." We went for coffee, maintaining the pretense of casual acquaintances catching up. I showed him pictures of the wedding, of the house, of the life I'd built without him. He told me about his job in advertising, the apartment he'd bought in Lincoln Park, the men he'd dated since leaving Lakeside. "Are you happy?" he asked eventually, echoing the question from the quarry years before. "I have everything I'm supposed to want," I answered, which wasn't what he'd asked at all. Thomas nodded, understanding the distinction. "I'm in the phone book," he said as we parted. "If you're ever back in Chicago." 3 months later, I invented a conference that didn't exist, drove 4 hours to Chicago, and spent a weekend in Thomas's apartment, finally discovering what it meant to be completely, authentically myself. When Sunday evening came and I had to drive back to Lakeside, to Sarah, to the life I had promised to live, I sat in my car outside Thomas's building for almost an hour, unable to start the engine. "This was a mistake," I told him when he came, down to check on me, concern etched on his face. "I can't do this to Sarah. She deserves better." "You deserve better too, James," he said softly. "Everyone does." "I made vows," I replied, finally turning the key in the ignition. "I have to honor them." I drove home to Sarah, carrying the weight of my betrayal like a stone in my chest. I recommitted to our marriage, to being the husband she thought she had. For 6 months, I didn't contact Thomas, didn't allow myself to even think his name. Sarah and I tried to start a family, the next expected step in our predetermined path. But on a cold January night, as Sarah slept peacefully beside me, I found myself staring at the ceiling, suffocating under the weight of the life I was living. I slipped out of bed, went downstairs to the kitchen, and called the number I had memorized but never written down. "I can't keep doing this," I told Thomas when he answered, his voice thick with sleep. "I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not." "Then don't," he said simply, as if it were that easy, as if my entire world wouldn't collapse around me if I spoke the truth. That call began a pattern that would define the next 20 years of my life. I lived in Lakeside with Sarah, running the cherry farm after my father's retirement, serving on the town council as he had, attending every community event and church service. I was James Mitchell, upstanding citizen, dedicated husband, pillar of the community. But once every few months, I would invent a business trip, a conference, a meeting with distributors, and drive to Chicago to spend 48 precious hours with Thomas, being the person I couldn't be in Lakeside. Thomas never asked me to leave Sarah, never pressured me to upend my life for him. Perhaps he should have. Perhaps that would have forced the choice I was too cowardly to make on my own. Instead, he accepted the fragments of time I could give him, building his own life in Chicago with friends who knew about the guy from Michigan, but little else. "I'm not waiting for you," he told me once, on a rare occasion when we argued about our situation. "I'm choosing this, same as you. If it ever becomes not enough, I'll say so." But it was enough somehow, for both of us. Thomas dated occasionally, but never seriously. I poured my energy into the farm and into making Sarah as happy as I could, given the fundamental deception at the heart of our marriage. We tried to have children for several years before doctors confirmed that I had a condition that made it unlikely. Sarah was devastated. I felt a guilty relief that I would not compound my betrayal by bringing children into our complicated situation. "It's okay," Sarah assured me, though I could see the profound disappointment in her eyes. "We have each other. That's enough." Indeed, her unconditional acceptance made my duplicity all the more shameful, but not enough to make me stop. I couldn't give up Thomas, the only person who knew me completely, who loved me not despite, but because of who I truly was. And I couldn't leave Sarah, couldn't destroy her world and mine, couldn't face the judgment of Lakeside and the pain it would cause my aging parents. So I lived half a life in 2 places, constantly performing a version of myself that grew more exhausting with each passing year. Only in Thomas's apartment in Chicago could I exhale fully, could I stop the performance and simply exist. "You're killing yourself this way," Thomas observed on my 45th birthday as we sat on his balcony watching the Chicago skyline shimmer in the summer heat. piece by piece. I know, I admitted, because by then I did. The strain of maintaining. My double life was showing in the grey at my temples, the deepening lines around my eyes, the persistent insomnia that plagued me at home. But I don't see another way. He took my hand, a gesture so natural after all our years together, yet still electrifying. There's always another way, James. It just might not be easy. But I continued as before, managing the farm, caring for my mother after my father passed, being the husband Sarah deserved in every way except the most fundamental. And I continued meeting Thomas whenever I could, maintaining our connection through phone calls when we couldn't be together physically. It wasn't fair to either of them, or to me, but I told myself it was the best compromise I could manage. And if I sometimes caught Sarah looking at me with questions in her eyes, if I sometimes felt Thomas's patience wearing thin, I ignored those warning signs in favor of preserving the delicate balance I had established. Until the heart attack changed everything. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in the office at the cherry farm. One moment I was reviewing harvest projections, the next I was on the floor, a vice tightening around my chest, pain radiating down. My left arm. My assistant found me minutes later and called an ambulance. I was lucky. The damage was minimal, caught in time to prevent permanent harm. But lying in the hospital bed, wires and tubes connecting me to various machines, I was forced to confront the fragility of life and the consequences of my choices. Sarah rarely left my side during my week-long hospital stay, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside my bed, bringing home-cooked food once I was allowed to eat normally again. Her devotion was absolute, unwavering, deserved by a better man than I had been. "You scared me so badly," she confessed, holding my hand as I drifted in and out of medication-induced sleep. "I can't lose you, James. You're everything to me." I wanted to tell her the truth then, that she deserved someone who could give her their whole heart, not the fractional piece I had offered. But the words wouldn't come, trapped behind 20 years of practiced deception. The hospital allowed one phone call to Thomas, a hurried, whispered conversation while Sarah was meeting with my doctor. "I thought I'd lost you," he said, his voice breaking. "When you didn't call at our usual time, I had this feeling." "I'm okay," I assured him, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. "Just need to rest, make some lifestyle changes." "James," he said, hesitating, "I'm 51 years old. So are you. How much longer are we going to live like this?" I had no answer for him, and a nurse arrived to check my vitals, ending the call before I could find one. After returning home, I was put on medical leave from the farm, restricted to light activity while my heart healed. Sarah worked reduced hours at school to care for me, and in the quiet afternoons while she was still teaching, I had too much time to think. About the years that had passed, about the lies I had told, about the toll my double life had taken, not just on me, but on the two people I claimed to love. One afternoon, going through drawers looking for a book to read, I found Sarah's journal. I shouldn't have opened it. It was one violation too many in a marriage built on them, but something compelled me. Inside, in her neat handwriting, was the truth I had never wanted to face. "I know about Chicago. I've known for years. Sometimes I think I've always known, even before I had proof. The way he comes home different after those trips, lighter somehow, then grows heavier day by day until the next one. I followed him once, 7 years ago, saw him with the man. I drove home and waited for him to tell me, to end things, to make some kind of choice. He never did, so I made my choice instead, to stay, to love him anyway, to accept that this is our life. Is it enough? Some days no. Most days, strangely, yes. He tries so hard to make me happy in every other way. Maybe this is what love really is. Accepting. Someone completely, even the parts that hurt you. I sat on the edge of our bed, her journal open in my trembling hands, overwhelmed by the magnitude of Sarah's love and my own unworthiness of it. All these years she had known, had chosen to stay anyway, had loved me despite my betrayal, while I had congratulated myself on sparing her pain through my deception. When she came home that evening, I was waiting in the living room, her journal on the coffee table between us. She saw it immediately, her steps faltering as she registered what I had discovered. "You knew," I said, my voice barely audible. "All this time." She set down her bag, removing her coat with the deliberate movements of someone buying time to think. "Yes," she finally acknowledged, sitting across from me. "Not at first, but for a long time now." "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you leave?" Sarah looked at me then, really looked at me, with eyes that held no accusation, only a profound sadness. "Because I love you, James. Not some idealized version of you, but you, the real person you are, and because I made vows, too." "I've betrayed you in every way possible," I said, tears filling my eyes. "For 20 years, Sarah, 20 years of lies." Now she reached across the space between us, taking my hands in hers. "Do you love him, this Thomas?" Hearing his name from her lips was jarring, worlds colliding that were never meant to touch. "Yes," I admitted, because after discovering her knowledge, more lies seemed pointless. "I have since the beginning." She nodded, as if confirming something she had long suspected. "And do you love me?" "Of course I do," I answered immediately, because it was true. Not in the same way, not with the same completeness, but true nonetheless. "I've tried to be the husband you deserve in every other way." "I know you have," she said gently. "That's why I stayed. But James, this can't continue. Not after your heart attack. Not now that we're finally speaking the truth." "What are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. "I'm saying it's time for you to choose," she replied, her voice steady despite the tears now falling freely. "Really choose, not just continue this half-existence that's slowly destroying all three of us." The weight of 20 years of indecision pressed down on me. "I don't know how," I confessed. "I don't know how to choose without hurting someone I love." "That's the point, James," Sarah said, her voice gentle but firm. "Someone will be hurt no matter what. The question is whether we can all finally heal afterwards." That night, Sarah slept in the guest room, giving me space to think, to feel, to begin the process of making the choice I had avoided for half my life. I sat on our back porch until dawn, watching the stars fade as the cherry orchards emerged from darkness. This land, this town, this life had been my anchor, my excuse, my prison. The expectations of family and community had shaped my every decision, from marrying Sarah to staying silent about who I truly was. But now, approaching the autumn of my life, I had to ask myself, who would I be if I chose for myself just once? If I set aside the weight of the Mitchell legacy, the judgment of Lakeside, the fear that had governed me since I first recognized the truth about myself? Who would James Mitchell be if he were brave enough to live authentically? I called Thomas from the porch as the first light touched the cherry trees. "I need to see you," I said when he answered, alert despite the early hour. "Not in Chicago, here in Lakeside. It's time for you to see where I come from, who I've been all these years." There was a long silence, so extended I thought we might have been disconnected. "Are you sure?" he finally asked, understanding immediately the significance of what I was suggesting. "No," I admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway. Sarah knows about us, has known for years apparently. She's asking me to choose, and she's right. It's time!" 3 days later, Thomas's car pulled into our driveway. Sarah had gone to stay with her sister for the weekend, giving us space for whatever was to come. I watched from the porch as Thomas emerged from his car, taking in the cherry orchards, the farmhouse, the life I had built parallel to ours. "It's beautiful," he said as he approached. his eyes scanning my face with the concern of someone who knows every line and shadow. I can see why it's been so hard to leave. I led him through the house, showing him the photographs of my family, the awards from the Agricultural Association, the evidence of the life I had lived when we were apart. We walked through the orchards, the trees heavy with ripening fruit, workers nodding respectfully as we passed. I introduced him to my farm manager as an old friend from Chicago, the half-truth sitting uncomfortably after the revelations of recent days. That evening, we sat on the porch where Sarah and I had spent countless summer nights, the unreality of Thomas in my lakeside space, both jarring and somehow right. "What are you going to do?" he asked finally, the question that had hovered between us since my call. I looked out over the land that had belonged to Mitchells for generations, feeling its pull even as I considered leaving it behind. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly, "but for the first time, I'm actually considering all possibilities, not just the ones that maintain appearances." Thomas nodded, understanding as he always had. "Whatever you decide, it has to be for you, James. Not for me, not for Sarah, not for Lakeside or your family name. For once in your life, you have to choose your own happiness." The weekend passed. In a strange, suspended state. Thomas in my home, but not truly part of it, both of us aware that decisions made in these days would reshape the rest of our lives. We were careful in public, maintaining the fiction of friendship, though I caught knowing looks from some of the older residents who perhaps recognized in us something they had seen before or experienced themselves. On Sunday evening, as Thomas prepared to return to Chicago, we stood beside his car, the goodbye as difficult as it had been that first summer, but weighted now with 2 decades of history and possibility. "Whatever you decide," he said, his hand briefly touching mine, hidden from any watching eyes by the car between us, "know that the last 20 years have been worth it for me. Every moment." "Even like this?" I asked, gesturing to the distance we maintained even now. "Even in fragments and secrets," he smiled, the same smile that had caught me off guard at the marina all those years ago. "Even like this, though I'd prefer whole cloth to fragments if given the choice." After he drove away, I walked through the orchard one last time as darkness fell, feeling the presence of generations of Mitchells in the land beneath my feet. My father had taught me to care for these trees, as his father had taught him. This legacy was part of me, woven into my identity as surely as my feelings for Thomas, as deeply as my commitment to Sarah. How could I possibly choose between these fundamental aspects of myself? But as I reached the edge of the property, looking back at the farmhouse illuminated by the porch light Sarah had left on for me, I realized that the choice had never been about Thomas versus Sarah, or Chicago versus Lakeside. It had been about truth versus deception, authenticity versus performance, courage versus fear. Sarah returned the next morning, her face composed, but her eyes searching mine for answers as she entered the kitchen where I sat waiting. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began, my voice steadier than I expected, "about making a real choice." She sat across from me, hands folded on the table between us. "And I choose honesty," I said simply. "Complete honesty, for the first time in my adult life. I'm gay, Sarah. I've always been gay, even before I had words for it. I've loved Thomas for 22 years, and I've loved you too, though not in the way you deserved." She nodded, tears filling her eyes, but not falling. "I know. I can't keep living this divided life," I continued. "It's not fair to any of us. You deserve someone who can love you completely, who doesn't have to compartmentalize their heart." "What does this mean, practically speaking?" she asked, always the pragmatist, always finding the path forward. "I don't know yet," I admitted. I'm not rushing to Chicago tomorrow. There's the farm to consider, the harvest coming up, our house, a lifetime of entanglements we need to untangle carefully. But you are leaving, she said, not a question, but a confirmation. Yes, I replied, the certainty settling in me as I spoke it aloud. Not immediately, but eventually, and not just leaving you, leaving this version of myself behind, the one who's been too afraid to live truthfully. My name is James Mitchell. For over 20 years I lived a divided life, believing I had to choose between love and belonging, between authenticity and acceptance. I hurt people I cared about deeply through my indecision and fear. I nearly lost everything, including my life, before finding the courage to claim the truth of who I am. So I ask you, was I wrong to finally choose honesty, even at the cost of the life I had built? Would you have found the courage sooner, or made a different choice entirely? If your heart already belonged to someone you couldn't acknowledge, what would you have done? No one could know, but my heart already had an owner. Now finally everyone does know, and somehow impossibly there is still love on the other side of truth. There is still home on the other side of courage. There is still life, real, authentic life, waiting for those brave enough to claim it.